Welcome, everybody, to our sixth Lift Up live broadcast. Thank you so much for joining today. We're so excited to kick off with the sixth one, following our first that launched in September. So, my colleague Rosie Grant and I are going to be co hosting the Lift Up live broadcast today, which is all going to be about equality versus equity. And we've got some fantastic key speakers that are going to be joining us today. But first of all, I'd just love to talk to you a little bit about Lift Up if you're completely new to joining the Lift Up community. Lift Up is all about connecting, championing, and inspiring women across the life sciences industry, right from academia through to C-suite. Rosie and I have had phenomenal amount of relationships that we've managed to build in our journeys within recruitment. So we're leveraging off of those relationships to build this community to bring women together. So today we're talking about equality and equity. We've got two fantastic speakers as discussed. We'd love to bring them as soon as possible into the live broadcast. But first of all, I think Rosie and I will do a very quick introduction into ourselves as the audience are obviously getting engaged and dialing in. So we really recommend, Rosie, I think your comments in regards to getting everybody interacting as much as possible in the newsfeed.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, hi, I'm Rosie. Been at Fraser Dove for 2 years now, but previous to that, worked within medical devices and had the absolute pleasure of having some amazing female mentors and leaders. And that's what really drives my passion behind Lift Up. Today, as you get involved, as you join the stream, please comment your name, where you're from, what industry you're working in, and use this platform to connect. One of our key pillars is connect out of the Inspire and Champion in this community. And we want this stream to be one of those moments where you can all come together, especially around such a special day. Happy International Women's Day. But yeah, comment your name, where you're from. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, lovely. Thank you so much for that, Rosie. So please get involved, pop in your comments, as Rosie said. And I'm Louise Williams. I'm the Operations Director here at Fraser Dove International. I'm one of the key ambassadors of the Lift Up Community Group. I've been in life sciences for about 9 years, staffing and recruitment for 18 years. Hugely passionate about the life sciences industry. And I think without further ado, we would love to bring in our first key speaker. So, Abam, I'm going to bring you into the stream. Hello, Abam.
Hi, Louise. How are you?
Hello. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you. Rosie and I are absolutely delighted that you can join us for our live broadcast today. Would you kindly do the audience that's obviously dialing in at the moment the honour of introducing yourself?
Absolutely. And let me start by saying thank you for having me. And to the audience, happy International Women's Day.
Absolutely.
Every day should be International Women's Day, but we'll take this one and we'll celebrate it. And so my name is Abam Mambo, and I describe myself as a Cameroonian American, single, working mother of a wonderful 13-year-old boy, Balin, who's asleep right now. And I began my career as an employment lawyer, still am. Practiced for about 10 years in the US, mostly at GSK. And then had the incredible opportunity to move back to the continent to lead ethics and compliance for GSK. And then moved to Singapore and then spent some time leading the anti-bribery and corruption team here in Singapore and then a year at Microsoft. And today I am a global speaker on belonging, which you hear me talk a little bit more about later, organizational culture, and diversity. I'm particularly passionate about diversity in clinical trials. And I'm just really excited to be here because I don't think we talk enough about the importance of having women in the life sciences from the research end of things all the way through actual delivery of care. So I'm happy to be here to share my insights. And today I'm the managing director of Belonging IQ and the creator of the Belonging Quotient, which is actually just a tool, an engagement tool, which I designed specifically to help leaders and organizations build cultures of belonging. Because at the end of the day, I know you probably feel the same. We all just want to feel a sense of belonging at work. to talk about that some more. But I'm excited to have you here. And Louisa, Rosie, back to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Abam. No, truly, honestly, your background, we've had many conversations over the last few weeks, really inspiring your career journey. And I think what it is that you're doing and that setup of Belonging IQ is absolutely wonderful to, inspire and support women, globally. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us. And we'd love to bring Sarah in. So Sarah, thank you for joining us today. Lovely to have
Hello.
you here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, and happy International Women's Day. It's a pleasure to be here and to be talking about equity versus equality. My name is Sarah Nochur. I grew up in India and studied there. Did my bachelor's and master's. Had the pleasure of actually having women as a woman as a head of the department when I was doing my bachelor's degree in microbiology in St. Xavier's College, and many women professors. And then I worked for a couple of years in India in Mumbai and came to the US to do my PhD. And my PhD is in biochemical engineering. And I was at MIT. Very few women, very few tenured women. I do want to talk about that a little bit. And there's actually a movie that came out a couple of years ago about Picture a Scientist by Nancy Hopkins, who used to be a professor at MIT in the 90s. And it really talks about the status of women or the lack thereof, actually, during those times. But there's plenty more representation of women in MIT right now. But my career in biotech has all been in the Boston area, in small companies. And until very recently, I was doing regulatory affairs. And I'm currently, though, head of Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, pardon me, at Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, a Cambridge, Massachusetts-based company that develops therapeutics based on the very innovative mechanism of RNA interference. So after 30 years of doing regulatory affairs, I was partly involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion starting about 7 years ago as an executive co-sponsor for that initiative at Alnylam. And 2 years ago, I took this role. And it's been an absolute pleasure to, see the progress that we have made and we continue to make. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. And likewise with Abam, I know we've had a lot of conversations prior to today, and I'm really, really excited actually about diving into some really good topic conversations with you both around diversity, inclusion, equity versus equality, also how you've set up that whole D&I platform at now Nylum over the last 6 to 7 years. So such exciting things to crack on with. But flipping back through to the audience, again, please keep your comments coming through. Talk to us about where you're dialing in from. It'd be lovely to see that coming through. Also, I think, Rosie, we've got questions. We've got a live
Yes.
Q&A happening at the second half of this live broadcast.
Yeah. So if as you get involved throughout the day, throughout the event, sorry, please put a Q in front of your question. This is going to help us navigate the comments feed. When there's a Q, we'll know to highlight it, and we'll hopefully get it in front of our amazing speakers today who can offer advice, support, and share their experiences on their own journeys. But I think we'll start off today with, I guess, sticking to the topic of embracing equity and the topic of our event today. So the first question I think we're going to bring forward is, what is your definition of equity and equality, and how do you best describe the difference? Sarah, I'll head that straight your way first, and then we'll come to Abam after.
Wonderful. Equity is the aspect of being just and fair. And you will notice that even a very young child will say, "Oh, that's not fair." And we have an innate tendency of wanting things to be fair. And the reason that we focus on equity rather than equality is because you need equity before you can have equal opportunity. And the world, the societies, the communities that we live in are not equitable. And there are reasons for that. There's systemic and systematic, prejudice, discrimination, racial, ethnic, gender disparities that have existed over time. And these sort of especially carry over into the workplace. And women have been in the workplace relatively more recently than men. And so the inequities and the cultural and societal responsibilities and the um, the hierarchical, geographical, and the what shall I say, the differences that in which the way women are treated and the baggage that comes with it by observing the world that you see in, and this glass ceiling that you've seen as not being able to break, all of these things impact women differently than men. And it's again not something that impacts everybody. It impacts not just women, it impacts people of color, it impacts LGBTQ plus individuals. So whenever somebody is seen as the other, the world is often not equitable. And so what we need to do is to actually provide additional skills, coaching, mentoring, support, and other systems in order to allow people to be on an even playing field and therefore have equal opportunity. So it's really the recognition, the awareness. It starts with the awareness about the lack of equity due to various, issues that exist in society and communities that we women also have to learn to get over, develop resilience for, but equally bring about that awareness in a way that enables everybody to be have that opportunity to succeed and to bring their best selves to work and their rise to their best potential. So that to me is really the difference between equality, where you treat everybody the same, assuming everybody is from the same starting point, whereas
Yeah.
equity acknowledges that for various reasons, including socioeconomic, political, racial, ethnic, and other reasons, there have been barriers in place. And so removing those barriers are critical
Yeah.
for us to all have the same equal opportunity.
I think 100%. I think I completely champion what you just said there, Sarah. And it's a little bit like this saying that I'm sure many have heard, where equality is about giving everybody a pair of shoes, but equity is about giving people the best shoes that fit. And I think that's 100% reflects in what it is that you've just said. So thank you for sharing that, Sarah. Abam, have you got your thoughts around equity and equality? How would you best describe the difference?
I think Sarah has done a beautiful job explaining what they are. And so, what I'll offer are just examples of how I think about this. I'm a big believer in, if my son doesn't understand what I'm talking about, I've made it too complicated. So, I like using really simple examples. So, growing up as a child, I used to complain when they served food that my brothers got larger portions than me. Mind you, I was a terrible eater. I didn't actually like to eat, and I was this small compared to my brothers. And so from a very practical standpoint, we didn't need to have the same amount of food, right? So in my mind, whenever I would argue about this, they remind me, if you had a little loaf of bread before you went to school, you'd be fine. You'd be satiated and you'd be able to focus in class. Your brothers, on the other hand, on one loaf, it wouldn't work. They'd be hungry, they wouldn't be able to concentrate, and they wouldn't pay attention. And so that has kind of stuck when I think about equity and giving people what they need to reach their fullest potential. And the other way I think about this is, when I think about leaning and the rallying cry that women, all have to sit at the table. I think about it in terms of that being an equal opportunity invitation. But how do we ensure that that's true for or possible for all women? Because when we're saying lean in, I'm thinking, okay, so who's already in the room and can just take a few steps toward that table and lean in, versus who's still in the hallway, versus who's in the elevator, versus who's downstairs, versus who's across the street, versus who's at home, versus who's across town and needs a bus to get there. So at every step in that whole process I just described, we have women who are capable and they just need a little bit of something.
Hmm.
Bus fare maybe, someone
Hmm.
opening the door for them maybe, to get into that room and sit at that table. So that's really how I think about equity. It's just adding a little bit of something to people who are ready and willing, but just don't have the full access. So I try to keep equity in my mind that simple to kind of translate. But I think Sarah did a beautiful job just kind of describing the larger context around it. So thank
Yes.
you, Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think thank you for that, Abam. I think I'm feeling like certainly internationally the whole equity language is now being used far more than equality now, isn't it? It's amazing how we're going on that journey where even the diversity kind of entered. It was diversity DI, now DNI, and now obviously belonging as well is a term in which we're talking a lot about, and I love that actually, Abam. I don't know whether you can share some light with the audience around the term belonging. You've obviously created Belonging IQ after an extensive, strong career at GSK and within the life sciences space. But would you like to give a bit of an overview on your kind of term of belonging and how important that is in the whole DNI process?
Absolutely. So first, it's not my term, but
The
I'm happy to claim it.
language you use a lot.
Right, right. I'm deeply passionate about belonging, and I think it belongs, pun intended, in this conversation because one, I had I was delivering a talk a few days ago, and I asked the audience in the room how many people here want to feel included, and everyone raised their hands. I said, how many of you want to feel a sense of belonging, and everyone raised their hands. I said, how many of you want to be the diverse candidate, the diverse lawyer, the diverse doctor? No hands went up. That tells us something. What that says to me is not that diversity is not important, it's that diversity is critical, but it's critical as the first step to something bigger we're working towards as human beings, which is a sense of belonging. And so when I looked back, and this is going back to 2020, at post George Floyd, all the commitments companies were making to inclusion and diversity, I just thought something is missing here because we could have a very diverse organization that's not inclusive, an inclusive organization that's monolithic,
Mhm,
or we could have a diverse and inclusive organization where the employees don't feel a sense of belonging.
mhm.
At the end of the day, people who don't feel a sense of belonging leave. And so ultimately, while diversity is really important, you cannot achieve belonging without diversity. We all have to be thinking, what's the end goal? It's really for people to feel like they belong. Why? Because when you and I belong, first, from what Maslow tells us, we're just better motivated, right? We're better colleagues, we're more productive, we're more engaged, we're happier.
Mhm.
And I wanted to create something that would bring that conversation back into the middle of DEI because for so long it been relegated, right? It's like the ugly step cousin we thought about, we didn't talk about. So belonging for me is very much
Yeah.
the outcome of
Mhm,
diversity, equity, and inclusion,
mhm.
and the rallying cry to say this is the one thing we all have in common is this need to belong.
Yeah.
And when we get diversity right, when we get inclusion right, then we're really making our workplaces a place where employees can really feel a strong sense of belonging. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for that, Bam. I think that's really, really enlightening. I think that for for people that are potentially internal, they could be hiring managers setting up a business. But what bit of advice would you give? I guess, Sarah, I'll come to you first around, employers trying to set up a DNI initiative for the first time. It's kind of they're very, very aware that they should be doing it, they need to be doing it. Um, There's the external PR promotions campaigns, which I think, if I'm being honest with you, I think over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I feel like I've seen a lot of companies externally talk a lot about D&I, but actually, are they doing it? Are they executing it internally? How are they running that operationally? Are they trying to make a difference, or is it just an external PR campaign?
Yeah,
So, what's your bit of advice, Sarah? Because you're really
sure.
experienced with this with Al Nilam.
Before I get started on that, I would love to make a comment about the belonging piece, actually.
Yes.
And, I sort of, when I try and talk within the company and also outside about belonging and the overall DE&I journey, if you will, there was a cartoon, for lack of a better way to say it, by Verna Myers, who used to be the DE&I lead at Netflix. And I sort of adapted it a little bit, which is, diversity is being invited to the dance. Equity is being given dance lessons if you don't know how to dance. Inclusion is being invited to actually come to the dance floor. And belonging is being able to dance as if nobody's watching. And so,
Lovely.
because when you belong, you enter into a room, and it could be a room full of men, but you don't think about yourself as a woman. You don't think about yourself as a brown woman. You just are there because you've been invited to the party, and you believe that you have something to contribute, and therefore you bring your best, in, self to work at that point in time in that room, and you're willing to lean in. So anyway, coming back to your
I
question, and
love that.
this resonates
No,
quite
that was
well with
really,
a lot of people. Um,
yeah.
so the biggest piece of advice is to get started soon. So if it's a new company, the sooner you
Mhm,
get started, the better.
mhm,
Think about it in a very concerted and active way. It is not intended to be something that you do just because you are required to do it. Equal employment opportunity, all of that is very good stuff. More recently, there's corporate and social governance. There's different ways of how it is, called, or corporate social responsibility. And those are all reasons why you may need to report about your DE&I initiatives, and who's on your board, who's on your management board, etc., and have that information be public. But those are all the wrong reasons, right? There has to be a very purposeful way in which you think about whether you believe that a diverse group of people can contribute a lot more than if it was not diverse. And
mhm,
there have been, study after study that have been done over 30, 40, 50 years with hundreds of thousands of people in different industries, which definitely show innovation is better. You don't take people things for granted. There is a greater productivity. There's greater financial outcomes. So I think I just tell people, enough with the business case already. It is absolutely the right thing to do, and so just get on with it and do it. And what that means really is that you need to have it be embraced at the highest levels of the organization. And
yeah.
if it doesn't ring true at that level, it will not trickle down. And it's
Mhm,
not just a matter of representation, because you can easily have people who look different, but who all have the same ideology. And we have a tendency to hire people who sort of have similar, backgrounds, or similar educational ways of thinking about it, or similar ways of thinking. You truly need diversity of thought, diversity of opinion. You need to solicit that. And it's not, I mean, the two may come together in the sense that if somebody has grown up in Cameroon or somewhere else, they are bringing their diverse experiences to the table. But don't assume that that's always the true, always the case. So diversity truly has to be thoughtfully done. It has to
mhm,
be deliberate. It has to be a concerted effort, and you have to have interview teams that are diverse in order to really make the give the person who's being interviewed the feeling that you are indeed serious about this. And diversity, like Abam was saying earlier, is just the beginning. It's really what do you
Yeah.
do next. How do you really support the people that you've brought in? How do you make them feel included? And how do you really develop that culture that enables for people to feel like they belong?
I love
So
that. I think it's so true. And I was going to say, in a way that where you've done it within an organization, Abam, you go to organizations and kind of provide advice or
mhm,
um,
Externally.
service around
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And what kind of barriers, or maybe, so let's say challenges, do you face when going in fresh into organizations, and how would you overcome them?
So I think Sarah touched on something with the business case. That is probably my biggest pet peeve. Stop talking about the business case. Uh, because I was looking at the definition of diversity from maybe 30 years ago, and it probably was one sentence. I challenge everyone when you get off this call, go Google SHRM's definition of diversity and see how long it is. And I'm not saying anything negative about SHRM. I'm saying what's happened with DEI professionals is businesses keep asking for the business case. And so we've been complicating and expanding and extending such a simple concept because we want it to make sense when it already does make sense, right? So I think that's just for me, it's been get rid of the business case. We know what a business case is to get to work. Let's just get to work. We could spend time writing business cases, or as a leader, you could actually join an ERG and show up, right? So when I think about when I go to consult with my clients, I say ERGs are great, but if we don't see leaders supporting, sponsoring, and showing up, it doesn't mean that much. Um, and the other thing that I see is an appetite. It's actually there to improve DNI. The
Mhm.
assumption many of us make is that many leaders actually know what to do. They don't. I don't think that business schools, maybe they do now. When I went to law school, business schools didn't teach DNI as part of any leadership program. So you cannot assume that your leader understands. And so it's important to be consistent and persistent in this and to be fearless, really fearless. But perhaps the biggest thing I've learned in working with leaders across different sectors is we have to speak to people in the language that they understand.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is if I talk very broadly about diversity, especially gender diversity, some men, some men may care, some men may not care. When I start talking about your daughter, your wife, your mom, that proximity makes a difference.
Makes it feel
And
more
that's
real.
what, yeah, yeah. And that's when I speak about diversity. I usually say we have to talk about diversity in terms of our physical characteristics. But when you tell your diversity story, be expansive. Be expansive. I gave it, and I'll end on this note. I gave a talk to an organization 2 years ago, and someone raised their hand and said to me, someone in the audience raised their hands and said, Abam, I never grew up around diversity. So this is new to me. And I said, oh, do you have a mom and dad? Yes. Gender diversity. You have grandparents and children? Yes. Generational diversity. You have any friends who may be disabled or veterans? Yes. Diversity. At the heart of it, we have to make this relatable. And so my experience in trying to describe diversity in that sense is not to water down the diversity we need in terms of gender and race and all of that in the workplace, but it's to help people relate. Because when people can relate, they can invest, and that's what we need. We need all hands on deck. So the biggest piece of advice I would give from my own experience is we have to get leaders to care on a personal level. And to do that, there has to be a language that we speak, otherwise they revert to check the box.
Mhm.
And it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of passion. but we can get there. We just have to find that language that brings people into the fold. I call that inclusive diversity,
Mhm.
because when we have our hands on deck, it makes it easier for DEI practitioners like me and like Sarah to go to the people who have the power and the pocketbook to actually support these initiatives to say yes because they get it.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
I may add a little bit to that, I think, there can be a tendency by using inappropriate language to marginalize the other, right? Who might be considered the majority, for instance, and it might be a white person, it might be a male, and that doesn't get you anywhere, and the language just gets more and more divisive, and there is no benefit to be gained by putting blame, because there are many, many reasons, as I mentioned earlier, that are systematic, that continue to exist, politics and policies that continue to increase that divide and increase those barriers and allow for prejudice and discrimination. And so, you can, of course, point to a few people that continue to, promulgate that. And of course, it's terrible. But at the same time, at any individual level, you have to take people for who they are. And
Mhm.
as Abam said, you have to relate to them at the personal level. And therefore, this is not about blaming men or us versus them. It's about having that understanding, enabling those aha moments among people who have not had to think about it. And you would be surprised at how many people tell you, I have never had to think about it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
the reason
Yeah.
is because they work hard. They worked hard to get to where they were, but they have never stopped to think about what barriers other people, women, people of color, other, kinds of disabilities, neurodiversity have had to face in order to get to that same place, right? Which is why people say, oh, whose fault is it if the woman wants, to meet 100% of the job requirements before she applies for the job? You can say, yes, it's the woman's fault, but she has seen it time and time again that if she doesn't get to that level of qualifications, she
Mhm.
she doesn't see other
Doesn't.
people be rewarded. And so, there is this self-doubt, there is this uh, potential lack of confidence that she needs to overcome and throw her hat into the ring, take those risks, advocate for herself. And, from a cultural point of view, there are so many cultures that say, don't advocate for yourself. You've got to be modest. You know, you cannot argue. Don't raise your voice. You have to be respectful to elders. There's a hierarchy. There is the
Yeah.
patriarchy, and all of those things influence people, right? They
Yeah.
influence you. I always like to tell women we have a role to play in raising the bar, in developing resilience ourselves while we play the game, but also changing the game as we go along and making it equitable in a way that
Mhm.
allows for leadership, not in that executive presence kind of white man definition, but embraces leadership that has empathy, that is inclusive, that is diverse, that brings everything to the table in a manner that is much more holistic and brings humanity that allows for that belonging. And especially we as parents have responsibilities in how we bring up our daughters, but importantly also our sons, in how we are role models and how we treat them and how
Mhm.
we encourage them to have the right value systems. So,
Absolutely. Well said. That was that was epic, and that was just going to stay in there. And I mean, you're absolutely right. It's not. And I sent a post out this morning, similar around the whole. It's not just about women supporting women. It's about everybody supporting everyone and having those male allies, and the men have got equal roles to play. And couldn't agree with you more, Sarah. And interestingly, I've been reading up quite a lot on this topic, and the whole women applying at 100%. From an internal DE&I perspective, I'm sort of going off a little bit down an alley with this one, but from a company organization perspective, what companies can do internally is simple things like look at the masculine and feminine language that's used in job descriptions for that. And I didn't actually realize. I mean, I interviewed somebody about 3 weeks ago at Fraser Dove, obviously, and she was a psychology graduate. If she's watching this, she's going to know who she is. But she's just done a whole thesis on sociology, psychology, but actually the whole kind of writing and context and language of feminine and masculine language. And she was enlightening me on it, and I was blown away about it. But even from an internal perspective, simple changes like that from a job description, when we're looking, or businesses are looking at hiring, that there's some changes that can be made to maybe support those individuals or women that typically will only ever apply if they feel that they've met 100% of the criteria. So yeah, you just touched on that, Sarah. So I thought I would highlight that.
I wanted
also,
to just jump in and give some shout outs. Some of the audience have been getting in touch.
yes.
The global reach today is astounding. So a lot of people saying Happy International Women's Day to all. We've got Santosh Miraka, Quality Assurance Manager. We've got Catherine. She's a leadership coach. She's looking forward to the session. Well, I hope you're enjoying it. We've also got Maureen Clancy. She's the Vice President, Head of Global Program Leadership and Project Management at Cural Oncology, and she's coming in from the USA. On the other side of things, we've also got individuals. We've got a previous ambassador as well, Shuli Porkus, coming in saying Happy International Women's Day. Hi, Shuli. Also, there's people coming in from all over the globe here. So we've got Princess Chuk Wuyam Agnew is coming in from Lagos, Nigeria, and she says, "Hello, everyone. Happy International Women's Day." We've got Libet Luce coming in as Head of Regulatory Affairs at Akiro. Many people coming in. Keep sending in your questions. There's one that's just come in, and it says, what steps can organizations take to ensure that gender equality is fully realized in a workplace? I guess we'll go over to you, Abam, first.
I'm happy to take that one. One of the things I want to say as I answer that question is going back to Sarah, what you so beautifully explained about why some people may be left behind. I went to an all girls Catholic school for 5 years, and it was a boarding school, and we learned everything, right? Science, math. I mean, the women I went to school with are doing amazing things around the world today. But I always found it confounding that this institution taught us we could be scientists, mathematicians, lawyers, doctors, teachers, nurses, everything. But every single day, we were told ladies are seen and not heard. Okay? So, for everyone who's listening, who sits in talent review meetings and says, this woman doesn't speak up. Why is she so smart, but she doesn't say anything? That's why. Okay? Because she's got the education, she's got the brain, she's got the training, but somewhere along the line, someone told her her voice didn't matter or to not use her voice. That historical context is so relevant. When organizations are thinking about gender equality, we have to understand where are these historical tropes coming from? Why aren't people showing up? One of the biggest gifts I have received in my career is working in North America, in Africa, and in Asia, and in leading teams on all three. Because every continent I've lived, I've talked to women, from managers to senior vice presidents, who've all said, I have never negotiated my salary because I don't want people to think I'm greedy.
Yeah.
I don't want people to think I'm bossy.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter how senior or junior they are. So there's something in the water, and it's more than just the water, that we do have to examine to say what's going on here. And I think organizations have to have those conversations. Another way I think it's really important for organizations to really push gender equality is, on the one hand, to, yes, get male allies on board. As a woman of color, I would say the biggest missed opportunity is getting white women on board as allies for women of color. I've often said, if we have people speaking our names in hallowed hallways, that's how we get ahead. There are mostly men in hallowed hallways. When white women get invited into hallowed hallways, we need them to speak the names of women of color in those hallowed hallways. If you don't do that, if we don't have that strong kinship in our backyard as women, then we're not going to get very far. So I think, one, understanding where people are coming from culturally and why women may not speak up. Two, really examining who are our allies and championing and asking white women to jump on board as much as we've done men. And the final thing I'll say is, I'm so excited to see how much progress has been made on the parenting front because the more fathers get parental leave, the more we get to rest. So please give parental leaves to all parents. It really makes a difference for mothers and for single moms. And this is emotional for me because the only reason why, as a single mother, I have relocated to three continents is because I had a company, GSK at the time, which supported me, made sure I could afford to have a living nanny because I had to travel for her. If we're serious, to me, that's an example in equity.
Mhm.
How do we support her to excel? We know she's good, but how do we make her excel? Let's give her the support she needs as a single mom. They did, and I delivered. Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, thank you for that, Abam. I think truly, truly humble. And I think I remember you sharing the story around your GSK and traveling three different continents and promotion and progression as you were going throughout that career. But it was truly inspiring. But thank you for sharing that. We've got. I do apologise. I'm going to apologise live that we have got a little bit of a glitch going on. I think with lift up. So sometimes with the internet connection, potentially my end. So if we cut in and out a little bit, I do apologise. We've got so many people coming through with questions that unfortunately I can't see them all, but our community manager is desperately trying to forward them through. So if we haven't acknowledged them all, we're 100% seeing them. So we've got some extra questions coming in, but we've got people all over the globe here. Bridget DeGarmero from Raleigh, USA. Thank you so much for joining us. Libet Luce, Vice President, Head of Regulatory Affairs at Akiro. What we'll try and do, I think, is post this live. Any questions that we haven't answered, we will 100% be able to come back to you. But there are a few here. One that's come in that I've managed to pop in here. Natalie Borinio, I think if I've pronounced that right, I hope I have. Conscious Inclusion Company. Question. Most companies make the change but start by creating the external elements before doing the internal training and accountability. I've seen and heard this too. So I'm interested to hear perhaps, Sarah, what your thoughts are with that. How do you go about it? Start internal, then external? Create a strategy for both first? What's your bit of advice that you've got there for Natalie?
I think it has to start internally first. You
Mhm,
really have to, take stock of what you have.
mhm,
Going back to the gender question, you have to start with metrics too. And the
mhm.
sooner you do that, the better. How are
Yeah.
you promoting people? How is the retention? How is, your equality of pay, what's happening across the board. Are there women represented at higher levels of the organization? And if you don't have metrics, you can't make change happen. So you got to have metrics, you got to have the intent, you got to have the leadership behind it, you got to have budgets in order to make this happen. Employee resource networks are critical to build a sense of community, and they advocate, they help you then really network both internally as well as externally. We don't do this work by ourselves. You really don't want to build a DE&I group within a company. It has to be, like we say, because we are an RNA company, it has to be in everybody's RNA. And so,
Yes.
you really need to make it such that everybody is accountable to bring their, humanity to the forefront, and to be aware that all of us have unconscious bias. We look at somebody and make jump to a conclusion. It's almost something that you do as a matter of, how you survive. And there's a tendency for humans to immediately jump to the conclusion of, this is an Indian woman. These are what I remember of are the characteristics of an Indian woman. So the thing that you really need to do is not to punish yourself, but to have that shoulder, the voice on your at the back of your head telling you, take this person for who they are. Don't have prejudice. Invite them to the table. Let them bring their, best selves to work, and reward them appropriately. So it's important to do that. And then when you build a sense of community, the different ERNs will work with you to network internally, but also network externally. And that brings that, good opportunity to bring in more diverse talent. And you work with your HR colleagues in order to enable all that training and other things that we talked about from an equity point of view. So it truly takes a village, and the it won't have impact, and it will not be sustainable if you really don't take this seriously, and hold people accountable. You have to really make it as part of their goals. You've got to make them understand education is a key part of what you need to do, because people don't even realize the language. Somebody was talking about the language that you use, and the
Hmm.
language is important because the woman, if she is loud, it can be called aggressive. A man who is loud is called a leader. And women are told, like you said, Bam, you have to raise your voice. So how you use language? Men were asking, how can you be allies? You can be allies by understanding, by educating yourself, by really resonating and empathizing with the inequities that exist, and supporting women across all parts of the organization, being conscious of language, and pointing out when a woman gives an idea and 5 minutes later a man gives the idea, to just say, hey, 5 minutes ago it was Rosy. That's something similar. Let's hear what
Yeah,
Rosy
I said something similar to that. Yeah.
and I think it's not just men, all men need to do it. Women need to do it. And I completely agree with Abam that we need to advocate and support each other. And there are books written, there's a woman called Mary Frances Winters who's written about Black fatigue, who has unfortunately got data that suggests that women don't help other women. White women don't help women of color, and if we don't have that kinship among ourselves, we cannot make lasting change happen. So we
Yeah.
need to change ourselves.
Yes.
We need to
Yeah.
shed some of the things that hold us back, and we need to get into that place to be invited to advocate for ourselves, to advocate for that raise, to advocate to be in the room, and to
Yeah.
be able to share.
And ultimately look internally before going external. You can do all of those things from an internal. Thank you for that, Sarah. I'm conscious we're running a little bit over, so audience, I hope you're bearing with us. We've obviously had a few glitches, so we'll finish up very shortly. But I just wanted to, yeah, pop in
I've brought in a
some
few
comments
quotes
here.
here. Yeah,
Brilliant, thanks,
a really
Rosie. Go
nice
for it.
quote here
Yeah,
saying, Happy Women's Day. Women are the source of miracles. Thanks for hosting an inspirational event.
love that.
Um, we've
Thank
got
you.
another one in here from Sally. Here, championing and supporting of one another is important in truly ensuring that we can make an impact and support the development of equality and equity. um there's others that have come in. We did face a glitch in the comments coming, so apologies for that, but I think it's just a credit that there's so many people here from all different backgrounds sharing their experiences, so
There
thank
are.
you to both speakers.
Yeah, and thank you, Rosie. Julian Cole, medical director at Gilead Sciences. Julian's someone I've known for a few years now. He's asked for some examples of masculine and feminine language. I'll be more than happy to maybe share what some of those are. I can maybe do that in this comments feed, post that so it's visible to everybody if that helps. Um, but look, I'll finish up. Lastly, very quickly, maybe Abams, if you could just say what's the best bit of advice would you say that you've ever been given throughout your career? This is now something we're kind of getting all key speakers to ask at the answer at the end, which is always quite insightful. So, what's your best bit of advice would you say you've ever been given?
Can I share the best piece of advice I wish I had been given earlier in my career?
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, go
perfect.
for it.
In a sea of white umbrellas, be a yellow umbrella.
Oh,
I
love
think
that.
I think we're not taught to stand out. We're not taught to wear bright colors. Hello. Um, and we're not, because we're not taught to stand out, we're not taught to develop the backbone that comes with taking hits when you stand out. And so I think I wish someone had told me that when I was younger or when I was more junior in my career, because I'd have been much more willing to be the yellow umbrella, and I'd have learned earlier how to take tougher stances, stand taller, talk louder when the need arose, and being able to take on whatever criticism came if someone had said, "This is how the boys do it." And I just think we need to pass that message forward to the next generation.
Hmm.
Do not be afraid to be a yellow umbrella in a sea of white umbrellas.
I love that. Thank you, Abam. And a very similar question then, Sarah. What best, or what bit of advice would you give maybe your earlier self if you were going back in time?
You know, I've been very fortunate, I must say, to have had an optimistic outlook. And you know, my mother never even went to high school, and she traveled all over India, not even knowing languages in parts of India that she went to. But she made sure that all five kids, four of us girls, were educated and could stand on our own, and gave us the freedom to go places and emphasize the need for values and for education and independence. And I think that's why I think the influence of parents is really huge. And some of so when you're in a place where you might be that yellow umbrella, that inner core, that inner strength, that confidence that you develop, the resilience that you develop is critical. And I really hope that we can get to a place where you don't have to think about it. But we are not there yet.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, till we are there, that kind of resilience, that kind of being able to advocate for yourself, and having to be willing to take risks, and shed some of those things that you've heard all the time, is going to take an effort on the part of whoever is being marginalized. And
Hmm.
it need not only be a woman, it can be a white male who's an introvert, or who's the first person who's ever been to college. So we tend to bucket people into different categories, but privilege comes in many forms. And we have to really acknowledge that, understand that, and really develop the resilience to be able to really navigate the system, but have the courage to change the system for the longer term. And that's where we really need to be, because DEI is not something that is, going to happen overnight. It's
Hmm.
something that we need to work at, and it needs to be sustainable. And
Yeah.
it'll only be sustainable if we all work together toward that common goal.
Yeah, I love that. Embrace, resilience, courage sound like great values for the Lift Up community group. But I think with that in mind, Zara, Abam, we've got to thank you so much for all of your insight. And belonging. Your careers have been inspirational. I think the advice that you've given those today hopefully will help many. We've obviously up community. We've got the page all set up, but primarily that is about supporting and connecting women such as yourself, but also less experienced people that are coming out of academia, that we're trying to drop this career ladder down to support them with their career journeys. So the Lift Up community page, which I think just popped up, but good old
Yes, there we are.
IT's having a bit of a glitch today, which is it's not liking me for some strange reason. But
yeah,
we've got our Lift Up community page to join, and our membership group, Rosey.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a members group that started where you can share with
Book
this
launches.
network. It's free, accessible. We've got people launching their books in there. We've got discussion topics, all the content running through. But of course, thank you so much for today. Our speakers have been absolutely amazing. Happy International Women's Day. I hope you spend it and celebrate all the amazing people within your life, whether that's just yourself or also everyone else. And we thank you so much for joining. But I think we're going to have to
cut off
end the
now.
broadcast there.
But yes, thank you. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
audience, for dialing in and the patience with the IT. But thank you so much, Abam. Thank you, Rosey. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, audience. Take care. Enjoy your
Thank
day.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.